Mercedes didn't win a race.
Mercedes didn't win a race.
Mercedes haven't won a race, lads. Do you understand how impressive that is?
It's been a pretty mad week of F1 over the last week, as I record this on the 13th of August, knowing that it goes out on the 17th, and I'm way too late to be recording this, but here we are. Welcome to my reactions on both the British Grand Prix and the 70th anniversary Grand Prix, both held in the land of Rule Britannia, and it's exactly what it says on the tin. And just like that, in Wix fashion, let's get straight into it. The British Grand Prix saw Lewis Hamilton take a pretty convincing win over Max Verstappen, however, not without its drama on the final lap, or in the final series of laps rather, as a bunch of tyre blowouts round the track caused absolute havoc, starting with Valtteri Bottas at the beginning of the penultimate lap of the race, followed by Carlos Sainz in a McLaren. It's quite sad actually, he's doing really well. He just didn't have the luck. And then Lewis Hamilton, as he approached Copse Corner, his tyre also had a significant blowout. And Max Verstappen on fresh softs was so close to winning the race, and everyone was waving their arms in the air going, if Red Bull hadn't hit Max Verstappen, he would have won the race. Oh my god. Well, think about it this way, if he hadn't at pit, his tyre might have blown out. And that wouldn't have been very good now, would it? So in the end, while hindsight played a big part in the result of the British Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton did win the land of Britain's Grand Prix. And deservedly so, to be honest. He commanded the race from lap 1, led every single lap, didn't get fastest lap, but that we don't need to talk about that. Anything else that happened in the race? Kevin Magnussen got taken out on lap 1 by Albon. I thought it was a racing incident, but the stewards said otherwise. Albon did grow in strength during the race, which I commend him for. Ricciardo had a corker of a race. He finished P4 in the end. Norris in P5, holding up the bags for McLaren. I don't know what that means. Like, holding up the bags. F***ing hell. Esteban Ocon also putting in a good shift. Sebastian Vettel absolutely nowhere though, while Charles Leclerc himself got P3 in the race, which is insane. Vettel was absolutely nowhere. And everyone was bamboozled as to why, but I am pretty confident it is because the car is built around Leclerc and not Vettel. So let's put that debate to bed straight away. Probably the most important event of the weekend, though, was Sergio Perez not being able to race at the British Grand Prix due to the fact he tested positive for everyone's not favourite beer virus. It meant a replacement driver was needed, and guess who they called upon? That's right, Nico Hülkenberg, back in the F1 grid after just over 8 months. He probably wouldn't have expected that, but he did a pretty good shift on the whole, considering he hadn't been on an F1 car for what is the equivalent of about 65 years. Admittedly, it wasn't the best weekend for him. He qualified 13th, which is understandable. He hadn't been in an F1 car for literally ages, and he didn't even get to do the race because something happened with his power unit, and that was the end of that. Anything else to comment on, though? Kvyat had a massive crash. He wasn't hurt, thankfully. It was just a really big crash. I remember that quite vividly. Pierre Gasly did a stonking job in the Alpha Tower. He got a bag of points for the team. Lance Stroll had a really weird race. Something must have been wrong with his car, because in a straight line he had nothing. So that was something interesting there. And other than that, it was a pretty quiet weekend. Alfa Romeo and Haas are still both shocking. Although Grosjean did display some exuberant driving, to say the least. But that probably concludes my thoughts on the British Grand Prix. On the whole, a very exciting end, especially, and one that I don't think has ever happened in Formula 1 before. So that's a very interesting one. We're now going to move on to the British Grand Prix version, the 70th anniversary Grand Prix. This is where things get tasty, because while Mercedes did dominate qualifying once again and seemed to have command of the race, they were beckoning young Max Verstappen. Despite being told by his engineer not to try and race the Mercedes, he basically slapped him in the face and said, "No, I'm going to race them." And boy, did he race them. He won the race, and in convincing fashion as well. The Red Bull had the pace in the end over what seemed to be an invincible Mercedes. and that seems to be their Achilles heel. Softer tyres and warmer temperatures seem to kill that Mercedes off completely, because it just eats up the tyres. It's fast, but it has to use a lot of tyres to do it. Whereas the Red Bull, because it just wasn't as fast, it was able to conserve its tyres that little bit more. As a result, Red Bull get their first win in Silverstone since 2012 from Mark Webber. Up and down the grid, though, it was a topsy-turvy kind of time. In qualifying, Nico Hülkenberg, who was in for a second weekend because Sergio Perez still was testing positive for COVID, qualified P3. What an effort by that man. Unfortunately, the race wasn't as fruitful for him. He ended up finishing, I believe it was P7, which is not ideal. Albon came through the field to finish P5. He did a bunch of stonkingly good overtakes. What a man. McLaren had a bit of a stinker. Lando Norris did get points, admittedly, so it wasn't all bad, but it just didn't seem like a very good weekend, unfortunately, for them. Leclerc finished P4 with an audacious one-stop. Vettel, I believe, was outside the points, which is almost heartbreaking, because a driver of his caliber should not be outside the points, so there's something going on. I'm not going to put words into everyone's mouths, but I do think Ferrari are conspiring against him. Renault of Esteban Ocon beat his teammate Daniel Ricciardo, but not down to, well, probably was down to pure driving skill on the whole, but Ricciardo tried to move on Sainz and spun out and completely burnt out his tyres. Very unfortunate, but that is racing. Carlos Sainz again out of the points, which is just absolutely awful. He should be scoring big points. He's driven an absolute blinder and just hasn't got the points to prove it, which is a shame, because he, in my opinion, just my opinion, he should have more points than this. But the anniversary Grand Prix was very exciting, and purely because they chose the softer compounds of tyres, and that completely changed the game all the way down the field. Red Bull coming to the forefront, Mercedes struggling to conserve their tyres. It's exactly what we need. Two-stop races, we're telling you, are the way forward. Some teams were audacious, went for the one-stop, others went for that two-stop, and it just created absolute mayhem. And while it maybe wasn't the most exciting race ever, it definitely heightened up from what was quite a tame British Grand Prix up until the final few laps of that race. So it's exactly what we need. Softer compounds are most definitely the way forward, and I'm absolutely loving it. I think all that really remains to say for me about that weekend is that I'm happy to see anyone other than Mercedes win, because that was getting very, very boring. However, with Spain next, I do fear that we're going to see a very, exhibitionary, is probably not the right word, but it's going to be more like an exhibition race. I'm going to see Mercedes dominating the race, and probably Red Bull, and as for the midfield, who knows, it could be an absolute corker. Ricciardo could get a podium, then their team boss has to get a tattoo. So, really, there is still all to play for this season, up and down the field. There you go, my very short opinion on proceedings for the British Grand Prix and Anniversary Grand Prix. I did forget to mention Hamilton did drive an absolutely blindingly quick last stint to get P2 and finish ahead of Bottas, who got on pole in the Anniversary Grand Prix. So that helps his championship a little bit more. However, Max Verstappen is right up there now. So it's all getting very interesting, and maybe the championship fight is in fact a lot closer than we thought it was going to be. Who knows? But we shall see very soon. With Barcelona coming up, I don't have high hopes, and there will be a reaction for that, I imagine, very soon. But if you did enjoy this mini sum up, in my opinion, of what were two very different but exciting races, then do slap a like on this video and hit that subscribe button down below. I also do have social medias you can follow to stay doubly updated with proceedings. Links to them will be in the description down below. But until the next video, whatever that video may be, provided I'm not killed by British thunderstorms, Jesus Christ. Once again, thank you all ever so much for watching. Stay safe, and I will see you very soon.